Pete Yost here for the Unbuilt It podcast. I want to give a quick word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods, their booth at the International Builder Show 2024 coming up in Vegas, and our podcast. Well, first of all, I've been going to International Builders Show for over 30 years. I love to go there because when I want to get good technical information and make, most importantly, the personal contacts with the technical people, I can do that at the International Builders Show. They've got good technical representation for their products and systems. We're going to be the podcast at the booth for Huber C3320 on Wednesday and Thursday of the show. But I want to specifically feature on Wednesday, February 28th, we're going to be talking a bit about the ZIPS system R-sheathing and playing that incredibly popular building science trivia where I get to beat the pants off of both Steve and Jake. Plus, if you stop by the booth, you might run into some friends from the podcast. If you'll be in Vegas, come by and say hello at the Huber booth C3320. If you can't make it to Vegas, follow along on what's happening on Instagram at Huber Wood. You can also follow along with Instagram, of course, with the three of us. It's Stephen Basic Architect, it's Jake.Bruton, and Building Right Peter. And I'll just say that there's nothing instantaneous about my experience with my Instagram account. But for everything related to Huber Woods at IBS 2024, check out their website, huberwood.com/Huber-IBS, and we're looking forward to seeing you at the show. Now on to the podcast.
Hey, Unbuilt It podcast. I'm here with Dementia Pete.
Hey there. I'm surprised you remembered who you were talking to.
It's like, oh, that's me. Hey, that's me. And I haven't come up with a good one for Jake, so we'll just say, Jake. What's up, buddy?
Hello.
So today, we have a really special podcast. It's kind of like Jeopardy podcast because I have no clue what the answer is. I don't even know what the heck the question is.
Well, so, I read a third of the question and went, I'm giving this to Pete so that he can read it.
We'll give it to Pete.
Pete would be very interested in this.
Dementia,
This is the Unbuilt It podcast version of Stump the Chump.
And even if we don't figure it out, we just blame it on Dementia Pete.
We should note,
so that's
if you would like to have your question answered on the podcast, we make no guarantees. Questions at unbuiltitpodcast.com.
I mean, I think last month, what did we get? Like maybe about 50,000 emails where we had questions. Like it's out there, people. So if you want to be part of it,
most of them were about why are you doing this podcast?
Why are you guys? Why don't you guys consider losing Pete?
Most of them ignore those. Were investment opportunities.
Yes, no, people wanting to write checks. They were just looking for the right address and right funding medium. So, anyways, a little music.
No, pass. I'm not gonna.
You were the one who wanted to.
I know, but I had to pass it off because I forgot what the Jeopardy tune went.
We'll put it in post. How about that?
All right, Peter, for $700.
So one of our new questions comes from Bill Bryce.
Bill Bryce, thank you, Bill.
I think that might be somebody else's question.
Terrific.
Yeah.
This could be like, be part of the podcast.
You draw the line.
It's like, send your email and be part of the podcast.
Also, don't read the person's phone number.
Hey, I'm hosting this. You guys are really like, I feel somewhat disrespected here with you when you two have a conversation when I'm trying to host.
Sorry.
Just so we're clear.
Here's the question.
Go.
Hey, crew, longtime listener, first-time caller. Hey, Steve, I've heard you talk about installing flangeless windows in respect to location of window in thick walls. Best in center 1/3, but possible in outer edge, and can save some material labor costs on exterior trim extensions if big overhangs or heavy water managed flashing systems. I think this is i.e. all four faces fully flashed with vapor open tape may not be the best option if you have minimal protection from soffits and overhangs. All right, there's a lot that follows this, but we're going to start to try to decode exactly what that meant.
Okay. Yeah. That's the way we did it in my house.
That's like a hand grenade, right? That's not a sniper.
I've heard Steve say this. So now we're going to.
Yeah. I heard Steve say this, and then he rattled off like about 15 different concepts and then homogenized them into this one idea. We're going to start with
when you install a flangeless window in a really deep wall.
Yes.
There are a lot of locations that you can place it in from the outside flush to the inside and then everything in between. And so I guess he's wondering why it's best in the center third?
So those are, what are those?
Let's define thick wall.
Ooh.
At what point does this placement probably start to matter?
Okay. I would think anything in excess of a 2x6 wall, larger than a 2x6 wall, I would consider a thick wall. So 2x8, 2x10, double wall, truss,
straw bale, 24 inches.
Yeah, all that good stuff.
Does the size of the window matter?
Yes, very much so. And I was going to get into that until you rudely interrupted me and said, hey, before we talk about that, let's get a couple things straight. Yeah, I was about to jump into that.
Why would it matter?
The smaller the window and the deeper the hole, the more risk you are at creating a microclimate, right? And I've seen this with Nathan. We were doing a house, we were doing a water test. It was the winter time, and we were climbing up the stairs. These were thick brick masonry bearing walls, and the wall was probably something like 18 inches thick. The windows were literally probably like 14 inches wide, 28 inches tall, but they were out near the outer edge. Mm-hmm. So they were recessed in that hole, probably to face of wall to, or face of plaster to face of glass was probably on the order of like 14 inches.
So they're flush to the outside.
They're nearly flush to the outside. Yep. But yes, for all intents and purposes, they were in the outside third. And because of that, you're not going to, like, air's not smart enough to go up and go into that opening and then come out. It just planes out in front of it. And so as we're walking up the stairs, all of these windows were frosted because they had moisture. It created a little microclimate. Now, you wouldn't have that problem if that window was 3 or 3.5 feet wide and 6 foot tall, because you would get, it wouldn't have the ability to plane by it as easy. And some of it you would get mixing with that air inside that window wall.
You also might not have that problem on that same size window and that same size wall had it not been in a stairwell as well.
Yeah, the stairwell. It's not like there's vents or
stairwell is
underneath it.
Traditionally garbage.
Yeah.
And somewhat climate dependent, right?
Sure.
And somewhat climate dependent. Yes. So where does it go in the third? Was that the first question that we asked before Jake took us on this roundabout? My walkabout.
I just want to cover everything. We got 30 minutes. Walkabout. We got to fill the time somehow.
I know. Well, but yeah, you forced me to lose my train of thought. Now I'm working like Dementia Pete.
Well,
that's a really good name.
Actually,
too,
this question, you can install flanged windows in really deep walls too.
Yes.
Right.
And they effectively do the same.
It's not specific to flangeless, but more often there's a lot more freedom with flangeless windows.
Yeah. But if you look at what are those, the isotherm drawings where they have all the pretty colors kind of banded? And if you look at the window placement versus those drawings, it's going to suggest that the middle third is, from a thermal perspective, that's the sweet spot of putting it in that window opening.
And can we look at that as like, well, that's the position where it's challenged the least from both sides, and it is also protected the most from both sides?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of those things where I would argue thermally it's the right spot. But if we put the window out at the face, that's probably the easiest to flash and get right? Because anytime I bend one of the control layers, that's when I'm usually asking for trouble.
Yeah. So first of all, it depends, and this is, I think, where a lot of confusion comes in. Just because you're installing the window on the outside doesn't mean that's where the weather-resistant barrier is, right? If it's got 4 inches of foam on the outside, the weather-resistant barrier could be 4 inches deep into the wall.
Yes.
So it's not just where the window gets installed; it's where the window gets installed in relationship to the plane of the weather-resistant barrier. That's where
is our prevention layer in our water management system, right? What's the line that says this is the no-go line? And water doesn't get past that.
This fellow is saying if you don't have good protection from overhangs above, then maybe you want to set the water in to shelter it because it's not getting much deflection.
Well, then all you're doing is you're just displacing the concept of overhang to each of the individual heads of window, right? So I'm creating a pseudo overhang by each of the window heads.
But I think you and I agree that every time you install a window that's not in the same plane as the weather as the barrier, you really complicate the flashing connections between the windows.
Yeah, it's challenged because you could pull it in and say, okay, my window's more protected, but now I've exposed the sill. Right. And now I have to make sure the sill is.
And now I have to drag head, jam, and sill flashings in and out of the opening.
Yes. And take that weather resistant barrier and fold it basically into the opening.
Okay. I'm not sure we answered his first question, but I'm not sure we really could answer it fully. But the next part of this is, can you detail a heavily water managed system for a flangeless window on the outer edge of the opening?
Yes.
And I would say
that was the answer I was thinking of. Yep.
Of course you can.
Next question.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as a flanged window, just without the flange. We just create the flange with a piece of tape.
And I don't know if you remember it, but we had that one where we took the Seagate tape, we attached it to the window, and then the window is flush with our rain screen system like we do. But before we attach it to the wood furring, we use their little like spatula tool and tuck it in that space. So you get like a vertical chase between the window and that, but it's all in the tape.
Yeah.
And so then it goes down and basically has the ability to drain. So it takes a little something, windows are one of those things. And it's interesting because when I leave here and before I fly home, I'm actually going to Iowa to install a bunch of windows because with builders, I like to do it. It's a way I get to learn, but also.
Oh, I assumed it was a punishment. That you were going to Iowa to install windows.
No, because you know what? The thing that I look forward to, and I don't know, I didn't do it the last time I was there, but there's a restaurant that has a 96er across the street from the hotel.
A 96er.
Yeah, 96-ounce steak challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise known as most of the cow.
Yeah. I've done 48 and I've done 72. I've never done 96. So
I am going to be watching Instagram.
I don't know if
Holly knows about this.
Well, she was with me when I did the 48. And she couldn't believe it. The steak was it was a sirloin strip. It was like a brick. It was, yeah. But anyways.
Okay.
But when it comes to windows, the thing that I think is really interesting is it's really where you have to have a decent understanding of your talent, right?
Yes.
Like you can't just, if I'm doing a job and it's a 8,000 square foot house and we're putting in a $200,000 macro win package and the guy pulls up and he's like, oh yeah, we do siding, but they're going to have us throw the windows in too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a little worried.
They're going to throw the windows in.
I'm kind of a little worried, but Jake's crew.
We do concrete and windows.
Yeah. We do concrete, windows.
In that order?
Vinyl siding, decks, roofing.
We haul trash.
We do it all. One stop.
I'm picturing one specific person that I know when I say all
Listen, that's not Jackson Andrews doesn't do all of those.
He does
things.
not. They do most of it.
They do most of them, but he doesn't do all
too.
of
They do
them.
most
They
of it
do
well,
it very
too.
well. He is. I've never seen anybody take out the garbage better than him. But that plays a role, and there's people I know that are like, damn, that is perfect. And then there's guys and we've all have seen pictures of horrific window installations that people claim to be, oh yeah, I can do this. And it's like,
Yeah. And every time you ask an experienced crew to do a new way of installing a window and flashing it, man, you're going to have to bring diplomacy as well as a spray rack, because I was working on a project recently, really complicated window installations, and I had to sort of talk the crew into, this is how it's going to work. And they really, really didn't want to switch the way that they are used to installing those windows.
Not to take the crew that he was talking to's side, just for our listeners. Were you wearing sandals and socks when you were explaining these details to them, like a true Vermonter, or did you have on work tennis shoes?
I had on a fog hat with a big brim, and I had boots on. We were going to do we actually took a hose and put it in front of
it was a hot sunny day, by the way. He just put his boots on. And we used the blower door to
depressurize.
We drove water past the we got water from a hose spraying right in front of a blower door, so we were blasting the water right into the window installation. Because we weren't in a position to depressurize the building from the inside.
Okay, so just
I have a video on that. I think I'm going to connect it to this podcast.
okay
As a resource.
Procedurally, we are asking for like, how do you actually do this? When you and I have done this, and I mentally went through this. I believe we have 3 houses under construction that all have basically the same detail, some with liquid, some with tape. They're all rain screen assembly houses, and we've pushed the window to the face of the rain screen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that the rain screen that encompasses the rough opening has to actually be included in your waterproofing. So the waterproofing membrane goes from our, in this instance, zip R sheathing across our batten strips for our rain screen and into the rough opening.
Yes.
So that our WRB actually punches out right when it gets to the window.
Really?
And then the window is faced flush with the batten strips that are our rain screen. And then we're taping or creating our flanged window from the face of the window to the face of the batten strip. And then we have head flashings and all that kind of normal stuff. But effectively, all we've done is put a little bump in the wall. And the first time I had a carpenter challenge me on it, I said, this is the same as if we were doing an exterior installation and we were ringing the opening with 2x4.
Yeah.
It's just we're doing it with 3/8 plywood instead of 2x4.
Mm-hmm.
And so, mentally it's challenging when you look at it with just the batten strips. But if there were, if we're using a thermal buck or a 2x4 buck of some sort, or even just a plywood buck to be able to push our windows out to the outside of a exterior installation, it's the same detail.
So this guy goes on to say, can you talk about the best detail for an effective and highly durable flashing detail for minimalist vertical TNG and minimum to no exterior trim? So this is a completely flush to the cladding installation.
Yeah, so you probably don't end up flush to the cladding. You probably just end up omitting the trim, right? So in the assembly that I just described, if you pull that picture frame of trim off and you run a cladding that is vertical over to the edge of the window, same thing, and it works. And that you don't want it perfectly flush because aesthetically it's never going to actually be perfectly flush. You're better off to have that little reveal and that reveal be considered and clean, right?
Yeah. I mean, pushing the window out certainly it solves some issues, it creates others. But I think the best answer I could give to the last part of his question is, if you treat the rain screen like a 2-stage joint and you make that rain screen as big as you possibly can, like on the order of 3/4 of an inch with, furring strips or 1 by underneath it, the bigger I make that, the more saving grace I think you have, because you have, does 3/8 strain? Yes. Does a 1/4 inch strain? Yes. But the 3/4 inch has a very large pressure drop where nothing that makes it to the backside of that wood is going to make its way to the zip. If it gets in there, it's going to fall in that large drainage space. So your saving grace is by having this cavernous drainage space behind it, right? So it's basically, if we looked at our water management and we talked about mitigation, this is like a very high level of mitigation by having a big space back there.
And he's talking about a vertical cladding, so you just do 2 layers of 3/4 then, right?
You could do layers.
A vertical layer of 3/4 attached to the studs.
Or you do it on Benjamin Obdike.
There's more.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more.
How would you flash the stone siding below the window?
Was there actually more to the question, or did your dementia set in and you had to? You didn't realize, and we're reading the beginning again.
You guys are going to get sued by a lot of people by constantly making fun of.
Not if they don't remember it.
Not if they don't remember. What? Rose.
His specific context is Zip R6, Climate Zone 6A. So he's thinking about horizontal core event and installing the window. So there's a minimal need for window jamb extensions, trim, or sill material.
Yes. That's why we do it with him, is that and I'm not beating up on the Midwestern redneck, take the wheels off your trailer market. No, I'm just teasing.
I'll have you know that I spent 2 weeks with my family driving from San Francisco to Portland, Oregon over the summer. And I believe that part of the country is supporting the mobile home industry way more than where I live.
There was a joke of a house. Remember that house whenever we would drive up to your house from Route 2, we'd go by that one, like it was Zip in Tyvek for about 12 or 15 years.
He finally did use furring strips and clad the house. He did. So he moved to a new level of
Okay.
But moving it all out, yes, it does save because those exterior extension jambs are costly. That's why we don't do it on your projects, is just because the budget warrants, hey, if we can just do 4 pieces of wood for trim on the outside instead of 8 pieces, it saves us time, money, and effort.
So this is another interesting part of the question, which is, how do you address the same situation for a no flange window? My gut goes to metal exterior sill flashing. So what he's saying is that if you don't have details around the window and you're bringing your cladding right up to the opening and to the window installation, do you need to do an exterior metal sill as part of your water management and or cosmetic covering of the ways that the opening relates to the bottom of the window?
How it terminates at the sill.
I
think aesthetically you probably need to.
Yeah, I mean, you need to put something there. But if you're doing a flangeless window, all the flangeless windows, I don't know if he's aware of it, but you do have the option to get a metal sill from the manufacturer, that there is a very dedicated lip on the face of the window, and that flange tucks up and gets attached. And so you have this Z flashing that would then come out and go over your cladding system,
which is popular because in Europe because
it's all masonry and such. So they want to add the sill to the window.
But I know this happens a lot, that we take a metal sill detail, which is largely cosmetic and a closure for keeping out ultraviolet light and bugs, but that is not necessarily part of the dedicated flashing system where it meets the WRB. In other words, they treat that exterior sill as the primary water management system, and that's a good way to screw up.
Oh yeah, I would never trust that. It's more of a covering. Are we near the end? Like, can I throw a somewhat of a summary statement at him?
I just want to say I look forward to your summary statement, but this guy has an interesting way of closing his email. So go ahead.
I almost want to get up and pace like a lawyer and do a closing argument. But the reality is, and I think you touched on it, Jake, you should be able to install the window and then spray it down and no water should get in, and then hang the cladding on a 3/4 inch airspace in front of that. And what the 3/4 inch space is doing, it's just mitigating the amount of water that the actual waterproofing system sees. So, it's screening the water. So instead of that, your waterproofing seeing 100% of the water, it's now seeing 5% of the water.
Sorry. I have to.
Go ahead. I have to. You guys verbally argue.
To piggyback on that.
Ooh.
This is one of the first things that I understood in building science 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that my WRB was what I was relying on to be waterproof and not my cladding. And the reason it came so easy to me was my use of the Schluter tile waterproofing system. And the first time that I went to one of their trainings, they had a display and I was talking to one of the reps and he was explaining how tile and grout are like 80% to 90% waterproof. He's like, and then after they cracked, they're not.
That's right.
So you can't just rely on them to be your barrier. You have to have a barrier that's waterproof before tile and grout go on. And that was like an eye-opening thing for me the first time that I saw a zip system, because I was like, oh, it is actually watertight. Like, I'm not going to worry about it.
So it's funny that we were cutting each other off, because what I was going to say is, as a carpenter, I always thought that I should stop the water and connect it to something wherever I could. If it was in the flashing system, great. If it was in the cladding, great. And I had all these discontinuities, right? So I totally agree with you that it was a huge aha moment. Like, no, the cladding's primary role is not to be the single line of defense against water. That was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. And
Cladding's there to protect the WRB.
I I won't say an argument, but we did get into a little
Shoving match.
shove, but it was a nationally recognized industry professional that was starting to talk about caulking like all of the siding. And I said, well, what happens when water gets behind there? And he said, well, that's why we caulk. And I was like, boy, you are totally missing the point there, my friend.
Can we play a guessing game to see if we can figure out who this person that was speaking was?
So here's how this fellow, and I don't,
It wasn't Matt,
why
was
he
it?
might do this.
No, it wasn't that.
So he closes by saying, thanks. And as a token of my gratitude, I'll leave you with a bad joke.
See, you think you guys always laugh at me when I did my jokes, but people appreciate them.
Isn't that what you're going for?
He called it a bad joke, Steve. The
Who
operative
cares? Who cares? The fact that he commented it. Go through the 50,000 emails we get in there and find one that references something you said. No, they don't care. They want to hear bad jokes. It's called entertainment theater.
This is the problem.
It's called
Recognition
entertainment.
is the first step, Steve.
Hey, Dementia Pete, I get it.
Where does the king put his armies?
Oh, I know this one.
I don't know.
It is so stupid. I love this one. In his sleeveys.
There you go. An armies in his sleeveys.
I don't get it.
I don't get it, he says.
You have to unbuild the
I
joke,
get
Steve. It's a lot like what we do about buildings.
I know.
Okay. That's a wrap on flangeless window installations
With our good friend
with our
Ian.
Ian. No, it's not Ian.
it's Bill
Brian.
Bryce.
Bill Bryce.
Oh, it's Ian Heiss. Is it Heiss? H-E.
I think we'd be better off to not give people's last names.
Ian
yeah,
H.
yeah.
Hey, if they give our names, that's
No, hey, whatever you want to do.
Okay,
You
just
wanna go
forget
to
all
jail,
that. It's
whatever.
just Ian.
Just let's call him Jim.
There we go.
Everybody's Jim.
Okay.
If you're not one of us three, you're Jim.
As we said earlier, if you would like to have your question answered by the three of us,
How can we find a place where we can join the 50,000 people that write in?
our email is questions@unbuilditpodcast.com. I will say we try to answer most of them as they come in. I will also say that you're more likely to get Pete to answer them for you because Pete is more diligent with his email than Steve and I. And I enjoy reading Pete's answers to your questions too, because sometimes I just wait and I go, yeah, me too. I agree with Pete.
A 20 attached to the questionnaire will get my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And
It will.
possibly get you on the podcast.
Exactly.
Jim.
Thank you for listening today. If you're not subscribed on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you already listen to, please go and do so. By you subscribing, that helps the algorithm. That helps other people find us.
Is it true that there's a new place to find us?
There is a brand new place. That's where I was headed. There is a brand new place that you can find the podcast. We are now part of the Build Show Network, which Steve and I already are part of the Build Show Network. So we're welcoming Pete to the Build Show Network now. And in doing so, you can get the video of the podcast on Build Show Network as well. If you click on the little hamburger
Live
menu
from the studio
and find podcast, you'll be able to find us.
Cool. I learn something new every day.
Until next time, thanks for
But hey,
watching.
no, Dementia Pete, like it could be the same thing every day. It just appears to be new.
I'm okay with
I
that.
don't know where this adjective to my name came from, but
I don't know. Hey, goodbye, y'all.
so long.
Have a good day.